Hi, Monisha.
Good morning, Verena. I'm just getting organized, as I'm sure you are. I will be back in 2 minutes.
I just have one more question. This is the first time I'm doing the recording. You did it before. It's just that I do it on my personal computer.
Exactly. You just hit the record when we start, and then I don't fiddle with it. And
Mhm.
and then when it's all over, then you just stop it.
Okay.
So right now it's actually recording.
Yeah, so I take this off, right?
Okay, when you close it, it'll automatically save it as a file and send it to you later. So then
Yes.
this file, you'll just delete it.
And when can I how do I start recording then?
Yes, then when you're ready to start, you'll start. So you'll start at 8 after the panel. Yes, it will be recorded. Thank you.
Now I see the button. Well done. Thank you. Now it goes.
Thank you for the prompt, Michael. And for everyone on notice, this session will be recorded so that INSEAD can post it centrally so that other participants in the challenge who haven't had a chance to speak to experts about the topic will have a chance to do so. And so on now to the expert panel. I'm very pleased that we were able to, in less than a week, pull together such a distinguished, diverse panel for us to speak today. First, to introduce himself will be Yanick Lhommel from Fairtrade Germany and Switzerland, focusing specifically on cocoa and sugar. And in the pre-panel, I was asking Yanick, am I going to be eating dark chocolate for the rest of my life? Because everything else seems completely unhealthy at this point. So maybe he will talk a little bit about that, as well as going all the way upstream to the conditions that farmers are in, the kind of compensation they do or do not receive for the products that we're purchasing. So very important perspective from Yanick. Thank you so much for being with us. Followed with a B2B perspective from Metro here in Germany with Sarah Blanchard as head of corporate responsibility. Metro was also a key sponsor for our Future of Food event last summer. So welcome, Sarah, and happy to have you back. Marc Zornes, an INSEAD alumni himself, who is was also present in our last event and is his company is doing analytics for commercial restaurants and canteens around food waste. So he will be focusing the pillar of food waste. And we're delighted to have him with us out of the UK, followed by Ignacio Gavilan, head of director of environmental sustainability at the Consumer Goods Forum. Ignacio's challenges, he can cover so many topics, so we'll look forward to your questions so he can see where to focus. And last but not least, Dorathy Shaver, who is got such an amazing role at Unilever, head of food sustainability. She basically moves around the company and raises awareness and consciousness for businesses to bring into their awareness during product development and particularly marketing of future products. And so delighted to hear from her. She shared some very interesting facts about food diversity and lack of food diversity in terms of what we eat versus what is available for us to eat locally, right? So when we talk about eating locally and food origin, Dorathy is going to be great for that. So now at this point, I would ask all of you to go into speaker mode. We will, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, we will turn the slides away now so that you can see the speaker in full view as they are speaking. And if I may, if it's easier for you to focus, you can certainly kind of go on black, and then we would only see the speakers and it would look like a round table. So if everybody's comfortable with that, we can do that now. And again, feel free as they're speaking to put your questions into the chat. Thank you so much. Yanick, whenever you're ready.
Hey, thank you, Manisha, and good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me properly. First of all, I really would like to thank you, the team here, for the invite. I think it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So just a few minutes on myself and introducing myself. So Yanick Lhommel, a French and Swiss citizen, but I feel myself more a planet citizen than anything else. My background is that I'm a food technologist. I've been studying food in France for 3 years. So I'm an engineer in food. I spent a lot of time of my career, roughly 20 plus years in the food industry with global organizations such as Kraft Foods and Mondelez at the end. And I had the chance really to look after different functions. First one was with research and development, then in quality, and then I spent a lot of time in procurement. And there is a theme of my career, which a lot of people that know me believe that I don't have blood in my veins, but I have cocoa or chocolate. Because it's true, since I have started the food career, I've been working mostly all my time on cocoa and chocolate. So I'm happy with this, and it sticks with me. It's okay. 2 years ago, I decided that the food industry was not fulfilling my wishes, and I was searching for my why. And I found it. I found that I wanted to move away from the profit sector to the non-profit sector. So I moved away from global industry into NGO. And I work now since 2 years at Fairtrade. So I look after two teams, the German one and the Swiss one, and of course still on cocoa and sugar. So a lot of my time spending on sweets. So people keep telling me the chocolate guy, which is okay. Basically, the reason why I'm here, and Monisha was mentioning it at the beginning, is my why is really the voice of the farmer. Since I've spent so much time buying cocoa, buying nuts, buying sugar, I think that when we buy, we forget who is at the end of the chain very often. Now it's coming back with COVID. It's coming back in the news many times. So I'm trying to make this the voice of the farmer stronger. Of course, as Fairtrade, we are pushing prices up because we believe that the farmer is not getting a living income. And that's one of the reasons of me being here today. And as I say, it's my big why. So I'm happy to contribute today with this part of me. Thank you, Monisha.
Thank you so much, Yanick. Before we move on, is there any statistic that you think people should be aware of with regards to cocoa, sugar, and the farmer?
Yes, there is one number that I can tell you. I was rewatching a film yesterday about cocoa in Ivory Coast. In average, the farmer gets 67 cents per day for his work. So imagine ourselves in the north, what it means for us. And there was actually a good advertisement in Holland, which was made. What would it mean if I have to work for 67 cents a day? Probably I would stop working after 20 minutes or 15 or 10 minutes, depending where I sit. That was an interesting advertisement just to compare the South and the North. So I'd like you to plant that in your head, 67 cents per day. Just think what it means for us.
Thank you so much. Moving on to Sarah.
Thank you, Monisha, and thank you to the panel for supporting and having invited me. I'm Sarah Blanchard and I work for Metro AG. It's a global wholesale organization. I'm based in the corporate headquarters in Düsseldorf, and my career has really focused around quality and then sustainability. My focus in Metro is on customer sustainability, so really the restaurants and with an overview of the 35 countries they're in. During my career, I've always been at the intersection of quality, ethical, environmental, and commercial considerations in food. I'm actually a formerly trained food technologist, so I have had experience of being in many different sizes of factories and farms, working in product development, R&D, auditing, and setting standards for private label. I've seen many more sausage factories than I care to remember. and also processed cheese. I worked on shelf-stable processed cheese at one point. So for those of you that have that, I'm either truly sorry for that or happy that I can bring a bit more background to it. So more details on there, of course, are linked in or on LinkedIn. Just some personal information. Well, people ask me where are you from, because you have a French surname and you have a British accent. Well, I've lived on 3 continents, and I was actually born and raised in Zimbabwe in Africa, coming to the UK. So I now have a British passport. I'm married to a Frenchman who is a big meat eater. My son was born in Singapore when I was working there. He's a 7-year-old and highly carnivorous. I was vegetarian for 15 years, but I've never been a big meater, although I do eat meat a little bit now. I love cooking. I love market shopping. I love eating with family and friends, although that's a bit limited by the pandemic. What is my why? It's encouraging people to love food and to ask questions and to be mindful about what they're eating. And in this context where we're talking about restaurants and what you can do as a community, if we think about, depending on where we are, around about 1/3 of meals are eaten out of home, whether that is in a restaurant or a canteen, there is quite a potential impact that you can have on your food choices and influencing what's put on your plate. So that more or less might have changed with the pandemic, but I hope that will encourage people to be mindful. One final why behind this, and why I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. In your introduction, you talk about individuals can't make a difference, but all of you together can make ripples. All of us together can make ripples. Well, I would encourage you to make waves because the decisions on our own are not by themselves going to overhaul what needs to happen in the food system. We're all well-educated members of the business community. Aim to make waves in your own organizations, in your community, and who you vote for and who you lobby for. You can support organizations in that extent. So with that in mind, I will hand back to the next speaker, and thank you.
Super. Well, thank you all for the time. Marc Zornes here, really glad to sort of join the discussion and to be invited to this. A bit of background about myself. Originally from the U.S., out of school, worked for the U.S.'s largest food wholesaler into the retail market, and then came to INSEAD after spending about 18 months actually in Central America and deciding that wanted to have an education in terms of advanced degree that really sort of broadened my abilities to get exposed to different cultures as well as sort of to work you know, in various places around the world. So then went to INSEAD in France and then Singapore, where actually I met my wife. So we are very much an INSEAD family. And then moved to London to actually work for McKinsey. Reason I joined them was because when I was working in Guatemala and actually did a little bit of work in DC, they really had a great voice on sustainability. And for me, while I see sustainability as a really massive issue that sort of policymakers need to take more seriously, I see a huge potential for business to be a force for good. And see it as something that's also just a win-win, something that in many ways makes economic sense, and kind of how do we enable that from happening. And so, you know, one of the passions of my life, and I'll get back to that in a second on kind of the why. About 7 years ago, founded Winnow, and it was the inspiration for it came out of some work that I actually was doing at McKinsey, where I wrote a report called Resource Revolution with the McKinsey Global Institute, and we highlighted that food waste was the 3rd biggest economic opportunity out there when it came to resource productivity. And just some basic numbers are that around 1/3 of all food is wasted. I think, you know, most relevant is It's one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters in the world. It's about 8% of all greenhouse gases. It's also $1 trillion a year that's thrown away. So we founded Winnow off the belief that food is too valuable to be wasted. Winnow is a technology company that provides effectively smart bins into kitchens. So we use computer vision to automatically identify what's being thrown away. We combine that with some scales to know how much is being thrown away. And if I, for example, with one of my bigger customers, IKEA, when I can identify that a certain amount of meatballs is being thrown away, I know how much that costs them. I can pair that up with how many meatballs they've sold over time, and I can give them production recommendations to help them cut food waste. People that apply Winnow technology typically cut food waste in half by value. We work in about 45 countries around the world with brands like IKEA, which I mentioned before, Hilton, Intercontinental Hotel Group, Accor Hotels, Carnival Cruise Lines, Compass Group, ISS, some of the major food service businesses around the world. And our customers today are saving about 40 million meals from being wasted. It's our ambition over the next 5 years or so to grow that to 1 billion meals from being wasted. And to put that into perspective, if we were saving our customers 1 billion meals from being wasted, we save them anywhere between $1 to $2 billion a year. That would still only be 0.1% of the overall problem, or 0.01% of the overall problem. So it's just a small fraction of the issue, but still such a substantial savings opportunity. I guess the sort of why for me is, you know, I'm a person that really can only get excited about stuff where my heart's really in it. And I see the food system both as this wonderful, awe-inspiring system that feeds billions of people every single day, but something that also can be hugely destructive if sort of not managed the right way. And, you know, the reason I founded Winnow is I want to make a point that, one, you can make some money while actually solving these problems at the same time. And am really happy to be doing that at the moment in terms of where we are, and look forward to a future where we can live within the boundaries of the planet, but also live very sort of rich, healthy, and rewarding lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I guess I'm next. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ignacio Gavilan. I work for the Consumer Goods Forum, which, for those of you not too familiar with it, is an organization that brings together retailers and manufacturers from across the world. Some of you are here today, like Metro and Unilever, but think about all the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, the Walmarts on the retail side. Think about the Kellogg's, the Unilever, the Nestle's. So most of them food and beverage, some beauty and hygiene. So what you need to remember about the Consumer Goods Forum is that it's CEO-led, so that's important. So we reach the boards of these companies, which is fundamental for decision making. And it's all about positive change through collective action. So what convinced me to get to the Consumer Goods Forum, I spent, similar to Yanick, I come from the private sector as well. I spent 15 years working for 3 very interesting sectors, fast food, oil and gas, and mining. So I think after that, I had to clean my soul, and I had to do something really good. And I realized the power of collective action, which, yes, you can achieve a lot. And obviously, I was working on sustainability on those 3 sectors. Super interesting, learn a lot. It was the years of corporate social responsibility beginning to be relevant, and codes of conduct and audits and social and environmental. But it's only when I came to the CGF that I realized the power of that collective action. None of these issues that we deal with, particularly at the CGF, like food safety, health and wellness, all of the sustainability topics like deforestation, like food waste that I will speak in a minute, plastic pollution, none of those will be solved by any of these large companies. It's only through collective action, not going at the speed of the slowest, that will make a significant change. So today I wanted to focus on one thing, following up with Marc's approach to food waste, and it's the the post-harvest losses, which is a bit of a hidden loss in there. So as Marc was saying, 1/3 of all the food goes to waste. So this is food intended for human consumption, it's perfectly edible, and it gets wasted along the supply chain from the producer to the consumer at an alarming rate. I mean, 1/3 of the food. Just think about the aviation or the phone industry. If 1 in every 3 phones were lost, that would be a disaster. So this is really an economic, environmental, ethical issue. So I'd like to focus today on perfectly edible food that never reaches the supply chain, such as unharvested crops that remain in the field after the primary harvest. Obviously, this food loss contributes to significant losses of fresh water. 70% of the water in the world goes into agriculture, cropland, and of course, fertilizer. So reducing those losses may be a path towards a very interesting sustainable intensification. And one of the keys I notice, or a structural factor of wastage, is the design of the contracts between the players in the supply chain, which fails to take holistic approach in integrating the cost of food waste into the incentive structures of each player in here. So one of the major reasons for perfectly edible food or produce, in this case, getting wasted at the farm, is not meeting cosmetic standards. So there was a report by the NGO Feedback in 2018 in the UK. So 37,000 tons of food, about 16% of the total food grown, was rejected by retailers due to cosmetic inferiority. So when faced with such issues, farmers, due to the lack of other sale outlets, typically turn that harvest either into waste or they just replenish organic matter in the soil. So it doesn't reach human consumption, which is the horror in here. And there are other factors like stockpiling, excess supply within a short period of time, on demand, lack of cold storage. There's a number of issues, but we're talking about 30 to 40% in some countries of the food waste happens at this post-harvest level. So a very simple recommendation to you, and we can discuss it later on the Q&A, but eat plenty of seasonal agricultural products, ugly as well as shiny and beautiful. So the fact of the ugly food is something we need to get used to. Nature does not produce perfectly rounded, shiny apples all the time. Sometimes they have spots, sometimes they are misshapen, but they're still edible. So the fact is that we need to get used to a blend, and retailers need to start selling it mixed with the rest, because that'll make a huge difference. So don't discriminate based on cosmetic elements, and it will make a big difference on waste. So I'll stop there. Happy to contribute afterwards on the chat. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dorathy Shaver. So food is absolutely magical. Food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability on Earth. So food takes a lot of resource. Food is a cause of climate change. It does release a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, takes a lot of water, can cause deforestation, and on and on and on. It also can be the best thing for the planet. If we do it right, if we eat the right foods, if they're planted in the right places, in the right amounts, and really in the right ways. And that's basically what I do at Unilever and in my entire life. So I'm actually a registered dietitian, and I focus on human health. So public health was actually what I got my master's degree in. And then I moved on to work in a variety of different sectors of well-being, food sustainability, and food and nutrition for the last 15 years, landing recently in the last 2 years, actually sitting in the global marketing team focusing on food sustainability. And the reason why I moved around so much and the reason why I'm in this position is because farmers grow foods that people eat. So if as one of the largest marketing teams in the world, we can get people to eat foods that are good for them and good for the planet, we will make a major, major impact. So everything has a ripple effect across the entire food chain. So you can't just focus on one part and not focus on the others. And that's what's really hard about the food chain, is that it's really, really complex. And every little thing that we do throws off another piece of it. But that's what also makes it really magical and wonderful and interesting and interconnected, just like all of us are. So in my many roles, I really drive people to eat foods that are great for them and great for the planet, and really try to stay away from don't eat this, don't eat that, negative, negative, negative. Which is why I recently led a big piece of work called the Future 50 Foods, which starts by identifying some of the food system issues, then goes on to identify 50 foods that we should be eating more of. So as a registered dietitian in a typical position, I would spend a lot of time talking about foods that we shouldn't be eating. But instead, I encourage you, and I encourage all of you in your families, in your personal life, and in your professional life, to start to talk about all the foods that we should be eating. Because 75% of food that feeds all these people on Earth actually comes from 12 plants and 5 animals. And that's a major, major problem. The reason is because we have to create a lot of the same foods. That's what causes a lot of problems in soil, causes us to use a lot of pesticides, causes a lot of deforestation, causes us to use a lot more water than we need, causes us to plant foods in the wrong places, and so on and so forth. The other thing is that nature is absolutely amazing. There are more than 50,000 identified plants out there, and we eat only 200 at most. Mm-hmm. So my challenge to you is to try new foods, to really enjoy the food that you eat, and also to go out there and look for foods that naturally nourish you and also nourish the planet. So that's why I worked with many partners to create the Future 50 Foods, to open people's eyes to the many foods that are not just good for us, but also good for the land. So that's what my ambition is personally, and it's also very aligned with what I do at Unilever and a variety of other roles, where I work as a board member in the Food and Climate League, and I also work as a human health advisor for personalized nutrition apps. So I'm really delighted to be with this group today, happy to be recently invited to be part of this. And I absolutely congratulate all of you for getting up this morning and listening to us talk about sustainable food choices. And I hope that each and every one of you does try a new food and changes a little bit about what you eat, because it does make a major impact on you and on planetary health. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Incredible diversity of perspectives. I love the public sector perspective, looking across the value chain, looking at the impact on society with, the food chain, all the way starting with the farmer, farm machinery and equipment. You realize how complex and how the forces, economic have to be at scale in order to reduce cost. But reduce cost at what price, right? We're seeing the price in terms of negative externalities not being put into our cost accounting as we look at profit at an individual level. Some of the companies, food companies, have way too much profit because they haven't been including the costs of what they've been doing, but they've been able to the environment, but they've been able to lower their bottom line. So it's not that they're culprits, there's self-awareness around this, right? In the food industry, I think we all recognize, but there's a limitation in terms of what they can do on their own. And that's why we need personal individual action, and we need a stronger voice for the consumer to kind of push things in the right direction. That's sort of what I'm hearing from all of you. I would like to allow people to give time to put the questions in the chat as they come in, and I'll field them to you as they do so. So why don't we start here with a very specific question, which I'll just ask Arne to articulate, although it's very beautifully written here in the chat around chocolate, right? So this, I think, would go to you, Yanick, to answer. And just keep in mind that we'd love to get as many nuggets from this in terms of what we can do individually to have an impact, as we hear the answer is part of the context Thank you so much. Arne, do you want to ask?
Yeah, I've been looking at which foods create what type of carbon emissions, and red beef is up there with 60 kilos per CO2 per kilo. But then I also found that cheese and actually chocolate also quite high at 20 kilos. So I know about the dairy and the meat. The chocolate was a surprise for me. Is this just an anomaly in this single report? It was an academic study, or is this something we should know about?
So Monisha, you want me to take the question, I guess?
Yeah, this is about the carbon footprint.
About chocolate.
Chocolate.
It's about chocolate, so I'll take it. No, Arne, thanks for the question. And the motto of today, or the reason why I wanted to join this panel is actually, obviously, yes, there are many things we should change, many things we should stop. I think it's a question of portion. It's a question of still enjoying what we eat. We should stop probably eating. I mean, Dorathy was mentioning earlier on the footprint impact on many of those and the non-biodiversity issues. So I think, yes, there are issues. It's a question of portion. It's a question of still enjoying. So like Michael, I brought myself an example of a good story, and I hope you can see it. It's a Ben & Jerry ice cream. And the message behind is just think about the total story of what you're eating when you're buying the food. These guys have created, these two co-founders have created something which is really beautiful. Yes, there is chocolate in there. Yes, there is ice cream, and the supply chain needs to be frozen and so on and so forth. But being meaningful, the portion is relatively small, and there is a story behind. It's a full package, including the packaging itself, which is really thoughtful. It's 100% recyclable, and we think about the farmer at the start of the chain. So yes, chocolate is a CO2 driver as well, like meat, like cheese, like many others. But at the end of the chain, many farmers depend on it. And I think if we are focusing also on agroforestry, there's a lot of agroforestry going on in Ghana, for example, where we support the farmers not only to grow one plant, but to grow many altogether. And this is one way to rebuild the deforestation through clever farming. For example, growing cocoa together with cashew nuts is one example, but there are many others.
Thank you so much. Does that hopefully answer? And the more so, I love the story behind the whole thing, including the packaging, because we did have a question coming in on packaging. And I think seeing it as part of your due diligence, right, on the food you're eating, where is it coming from? And I think packaging is a big question that's coming up here in the chat. How can we know what labels to trust or not trust? And maybe Ignacio, if you have a point of view on that, how do we know where our food is really coming from? Or maybe Sarah, you have a specific view on this as well. How do we know where the origin of the food really is? What can we do to ask our retailers? I mean, and how do we do that? How do I go to my local grocery store and ask them, where I want to know where this comes from? By the way, I shop at Aldi, and I have seen a dramatic shift where they now are publishing the countries their food's coming from. And I specifically don't buy now. Unfortunately, I eat less papaya because it's not grown in Germany. So let me open it up to see if any of you want to take that question about labels and food origin.
Yeah, I can go, and I'll be very worried the day papaya starts growing in Germany. That'll mean climate change has really, made it through. I think, you have out there almost 500 eco labels, so it became almost a business. You have the Fairtrade ones that are known to us, but then you have on flowers, you have on honey, on 1,000 products. Some of them well-intentioned, some others not so much. So it's difficult. We did some recommendations at CGF, not for consumers, but for companies to buy commodities like palm oil, soy, or paper and pulp on certification schemes. But when it comes to the consumer, it's a bit more difficult to give recommendations. I had a conversation the other day with Amazon. And as all of us move into buying food online, it's quite interesting because you do a bit more research than at the supermarket. At the supermarket, you go for your papaya, you see it comes from Dominican Republic, you leave it, you take it, you make a decision. When you're shopping online, you want to see credentials on the social side as well. Has this been grown with people that are paid fair wages or legal wages even? Has this been grown using pesticides, herbicides? So it becomes a long list. The last time we checked, people will go up to 300 attributes on a product. That goes from social to environmental to, of course, ethical, transportation, tax evasion. I mean, there's so many things that people look into before buying. So there are a number of labels that are trusted, that are serious, that have a good process behind. Some others are you know, I live in France now, and pretty much every product has the word bio next to it. When you start digging a bit, some of them is 25% of one of the ingredients might be bio, but then the product can be called bio because there's enough percentage in there. So it's a bit confusing. So one of the things we're trying to do, to your point, is transparency, traceability, being very, very clear to the consumer. How do we convey that message? Is it a traffic light mechanism? Is it just writing it? But it's so small that nobody will look into that. So I think as we move into more online shopping, these things will be more and more clear. I'll stop there. I can elaborate a bit more, but want others to talk as well. So.
Okay, great to hear you're working on it. Maybe some INSEAD alumni can help you with that. Sarah, over to you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's interesting how we are talking here about shopping, so online with Amazon and going to our retailer and like Aldi and of course Metro. I would really encourage people to take up cooking themselves. And then you are going to have more simple ingredients. Now, this is a very simplified way of looking at it, and it is very dependent on your own circumstances, your time, your skills, your background, your money, etc. But when you start looking at what you can make yourself, things get to be a little bit easier. And I'm speaking there as, well, a mother and a wife, somebody who likes food, who also is working and is under pressure. I'm not talking about chocolate because of course I can't make chocolate and I can't make coffee, but I'm talking about a lot of the packaged foods where we have to ask these questions, where, as Ignacio said, we buy something that has bio on it, then we get home and then we realize, well, there's only a small percentage of that. Let's think about when we're shopping retailers, we can also shop at local retailers where we have them. And okay, this is very dependent again where you are, but those communities really do need to have our support if we want to have vibrant communities. So you can do wonderful things like tracing where your pork is from. I think it is in Waitrose or Marks and Spencer, for example, in the UK, using DNA profile, fingerprint that you can scan that has been kept in a database from real pigs. You know where exactly which piglet it has come from. And that's really wonderful. I'm very happy that that is there because that is a need. But I think there's also this need to really simplify things. We're not talking about just go to a farm and take the leg of lamb that comes from there. We're also talking about restaurants. In Metro, use your local restaurants, support your local community. They desperately need it now more than ever, particularly with the pandemic. And what we see is restaurants that are more resilient, starting to survive. Those are the ones that have shorter menus, less complicated ingredients, and less generation of waste. So this is a very, very simplified view on it. It's dependent on people's situations, but I think there is really that need to look at the basis of the foods and start to make things yourself as well.
I'll just quickly touch on this from a different perspective, of course, because of course I work in Unilever, we have packaged food. And people are looking to us actually as well to say, you know, where are the tomatoes in our tomato soup coming from? And, you know, how much is the farmer paid? And actually, what's the name of the farmer even? So there's some work that we've been doing for quite some time on looking at, you know, really becoming super transparent from end to end of our supply chain. And it is something that we absolutely will do and that we can do. Honestly, the hard part about it is, where do you put it on the pack? Because the reality of it is that people don't really look at your pack that much. And we say we'll do it with a QR code, but most people don't look at a QR code. So my ask of all of you actually, and all of your friends and everybody that really wants to know where the foods are from, is make sure that one, you make your needs known and what you want known. So to your retailer, talk to your retail managers, call up the help center of your favorite products, and actually only purchase products that have transparency. And when you do that, every other company will change. So I can't tell you how strong consumer demand is. And when consumers, when people, you, me, our friends, our parents, our children, start to demand foods that show where they're from and tell the story of where they're from, then things will change. And although this may be a controversial perspective, I'm going to give it anyway. We do need to buy foods from all over the world. And we really shouldn't be only buying local from a human health and a social health and environmental health perspective. We need to eat a wide variety of foods from all over the world. The only way that people that are in the poorest part of the world will stop being poor is if we pay those farmers more, and if we leave the foods to be grown where they're grown. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is where a lot of the Future 50 foods are grown, and make sure that they're paid a good wage, and make sure that we don't increase the demand so much that they can't have their local foods, and open those supply chains to big companies in a sustainable way, help them understand how to grow those foods for high yield that's also great for the environment, and allow them to continue to do what they do best with the foods that grow best in their environment, and eat those foods. So there's absolutely an argument for everything across the food chain, one way or the other. So my ask of you is also to have a huge open mind when it comes to the food chain. There's absolutely not one answer. There's not one solution. The whole idea behind what we're doing with our food is that we need to look further into what we're doing, understand and make our choices, but it shouldn't be a yes or no situation. You need to understand the whole situation out there for the whole world in order for us to fix this not only for ourselves, but also for people all over the world.
Okay, thank you so much, Dorathy. We have about time for one more question. So there's one coming in, I think exactly for you, Marc, from Winnow. And then I want to come back and have everyone reflect on Dorathy's comments now as we transition to the last couple of minutes, and just put into your chat what you would pledge to do. You know, some information you're going to go look for as part of this event panel now during the challenge time. What other questions, how can we as an INSEAD group, Business and Society, the CIC Challenge, help you? Just kind of put your pledges out there. I became a flexitarian with Johannes after our event. We've dramatically decreased food consumption. We made that pledge at that event. Feel free to share kind of what you're going to do after this event. And so the last couple of questions go to Marc. Marc, Fiona Huang on the team went to a dumpster in Munich, was shocked how much food was wasted, and asked why she can't purchase some of that. And to your point earlier, it's not legally allowable in many places for restaurants to kind of then, you know, prepare again or share prepared food. Could you just comment a little bit on, you know, what's something that we can do or questions we can ask to reduce food waste of prepared food in restaurants?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two questions there. One is, you know, why is it that kind of all is this food waste happening, and what can be done from a policy perspective? And then what can we do? We are seeing a shift in policy around food waste. Actually, one of the things happening in the UK is likely that large businesses are going to be required by law to report how much food waste they're actually generating. And that sort of transparency is something that I think would drive a lot of value worldwide. It's also something that drives economic benefit. When you start measuring how much food you waste, you generally start to reduce it. And if you're in the business of selling and preparing food, you're basically throwing away your raw materials. So that's fairly intuitive that would make sense. And there's lots of ways to do it, of course, beyond Winnow. We just happen to be the best way to do it. I guess sort of personally, you know, what you can do about it. I take two aspects on this. There's something you can do in homes and in restaurants, and it's really just being careful about not just what you buy, but what you prepare. We did some work with Sainsbury's to put our technology into homes to measure food waste and really get a deep understanding of why food waste is happening. And one of the insights that came out of it was roughly half the food that was being thrown away wasn't that people bought stuff and it went out of code, which is I think what most people think of when they throw away food, is that they cooked food they didn't eat. And that's actually fairly straightforward to manage, because what you're doing is you just be a little bit more thoughtful around kind of portions you prepare, and as well as kind of, you know, making sure that when you do cook food and you have leftovers that you work through it. And I think it's a pretty easy thing to do that not only leads to a healthier lifestyle, will save you money, but will also reduce food waste. But I do just want to also challenge that the people on this call, while I applaud the personal responsibility that you're taking, and I think we all should, I mean, we have to walk the walk. Let's also not miss the fact that each of us has an over-indexed amount of influence on either our business, whether we're in the food industry or not. And there's a responsibility we have to not just do something at home, but ask what the businesses we're working with can do. So if you're in the food business, what can you do to take food waste seriously, and how you can drive that seems straightforward. And if you're not, really pause and ask yourself, because your competitors are probably doing that. If you're not in the food business, you probably feed people, and trying to figure out what you're doing about food waste and how you feed people and what you're doing to reduce that can drive huge benefits. And in the same way that consumers can go to retailers and say, and I fully agree, what's the provenance of what I'm actually buying? I want to know these things. You can go to the people who you work with, who feed your employees, who you have your supply chain with, and ask them what they're doing about food waste, and actually start to contractually ask for that transparency to be able to drive that down. That's how we're going to make this change outside of policy. And the thing that I'd leave with is that we don't really have a lot of time here. That I think it's really great, and I think it's important that we all make change, but we need to move quickly, because we don't have decades to start to make change at scale. We need to figure out how we start to scale up change in the next 5 years. And we need to be asking ourselves very seriously how we do that.
Thank you so much. To the one important point we haven't touched on yet is, and it's part of the CIC challenge, is peer-to-peer influence. So knowing that you're taking individual action, but you're also influencing others, particularly in your household. I'll mention the fact that we were flexitarian. That affected my children. My children don't allow me to buy things that are not strawberries, not bought in Bavaria. So we're having a huge intergenerational challenge. A lot of us have young kids, and they're actually holding us accountable. So Kelsey has the last question here for us on that.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for the talk. It's already been super inspiring. I actually was a part of the original Future for Food event that I helped Monisha and the rest of the INSEAD team plan. As they probably know from that event, I have been vegan now for about 4 years. And I, similar to Monisha's situation, have seen that much of the drive in the changes in food habits of my family have been driven from bottom up. So by me to the older generation. So my mother's now vegan, my stepmom is now vegan, my sister is now vegetarian, my dad is now about 85%. So what I'm trying to figure out as a younger person is, how do I help the older generations who are perhaps more stuck in their own ways be more aware and cognizant of their food choices in a more attractivism way. And I think this might be for Dorathy, because she's in the marketing sector, so this might be something that she might be able to touch on. So thank you for your discussion, and I'll leave it to you.
I'm happy to briefly touch on it. I know we only have, I think 1 minute left, but yeah, how do we inspire people to eat to eat food that's better for them. You know, I think there's a variety of different things that we can do. I think the best thing that we can do is make it taste really good. So food needs to taste really good. The number one reason why people eat food still everywhere around the world, regardless of having a lot of money or little money, is for the taste of food. So the best thing we can do is work with chefs, all of us. If you know a chef, if you have a chef in your life, work with chefs to get them to help you to understand how to make food taste better in your home, in your industry, across everything that you're doing, because they're really the ones that we need to work with to get the food to taste better and to really get influencers out there to talk about it. So more and more influencers, David and Victoria Beckham, for example, Beyonce and Jay-Z, they're all talking about eating foods that are better for them and better for the planet. So I think we're on the right track, and that's how we'll get there.
I'm an influencer, Dorothy, and I'm an old white man, and I tried it and I can recommend it.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. We also all decided to bring our favorite products. This one's a bit controversial. We didn't get into greenwashing, and Oatly is a pretty good tasting product. It has its CO2 footprint, but the investors are consumers are very concerned about where they're getting their investment from, and if it's green investors and green finance. So like I said, much more to be explored. We've kind of run out of time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm just gonna take it back to Raquel, who can encourage us again. When do we need to sign up for the challenge? When should we start? When is it too late? If you could give us the key dates. We will send you all an email afterwards with the link to sign up for the challenge, where you can track your carbon footprint and your eating habits. Please share this with friends and family. This is not just an INSEAD initiative. We're trying to get thousands of people to participate and give us feedback and have the experience and keep the conversations going. So please write back to me and Raquel with any questions.
Monisha, sorry to jump in. Is there a possibility that all the questions we have in the chat can be answered after this meeting?
Yeah, so I will capture, great idea, Udo. Let's capture all the questions in the chat. We'll save them, we'll distribute them to the panelists, and then we'll distribute back as part of the follow-up the answers. Thank you.
I think that would be quite good, you know?
Yeah. Any other suggestions for us? Put them in the chat as we close out here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Over to you, Raquel.
Thank you, everyone. So the information is already in the chat about how to join. We'll also send you an email about it. The most important date is the 15th of October, when we will start the pre-challenge phase. And remember, this is about taking steps towards a long-term result. So it's not about everyone needs to be vegan right away. It's just about finding the things in your life that you can change and have this awareness. So this is the most important thing. And as Monisha said, it's not an INSEAD exclusive initiative. Share it with your family and friends and have access to this amazing app with information and tips and gamification, and hopefully have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, thank you, Raquel. This was a very inspiring event, and I thank everybody who contributed to this. And as an engineer, I'm always saying reduce waste. I was very impressed when Marc said that 1/3 of the IKEA meatballs are no longer being wasted. So give everything to the consumer power. We can make a change. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.